Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along tonight. I didn't know I had so many friends apart from the ones I paid to turn up. Just kidding, I'm too cheap for a stunt like that. Anyway, I didn't need to. I'm a hip guy. I'm into the social media and all that stuff. Make it up as you go along. It's never any different. Walt Whitman knew what it was all about 150 years ago. He just published Leaves of Grass, his seminal book of American poetry, and one of his reviewers suggested he should be sent to an insane asylum. This reviewer said he would, and I quote, "not aid in extending the sale of this intensely vulgar, nay, absolutely beastly book by telling our readers where it may be purchased." No book reviewers have been invited to this launch. So Walt did the only thing he could do if you're getting bad reviews. He wrote one himself. "An American bard at last," he declared, self-reliant with haughty eyes, assuming to himself all the attributes of his country, steps Walt Whitman into literature. He recognises no annihilation or death or loss of identity. He is the largest lover and sympathiser that has appeared in literature. I wasn't going to take any chances. Inspired by Walt, I set out to review The Gaze of Dogs myself. I was 20 pages into it and I had to give up. I was overwhelmed. I'd been inside the thing for so long, it wasn't until I had a good, hard, objective look at it I realised how bloody good the thing was. Nobody was going to believe this review, no matter how sincerely objective it was. Suddenly I wasn't afraid of the critics anymore. It'd be impossible to say anything bad about this book. The bloody thing was armour-plated. I decided instead to send out advance copies to some less well-known literary critics around the country. Well, around Glebe, Newtown, Camperdown area. The cost of postage is prohibitive. I had to hand-deliver them. And so I'd like to share with you a sample of their responses. From Leonardo Saunders, these critics are all near or distant relatives of mine, in case you're wondering about the similarity of some of the names. From Leonardo in Forest Lodge comes, "The Gaze of Dogs is a triumph. It sails fearlessly into uncharted territory. It scales new heights of literary excellence. The dialogue sings, the prose soars. It gave me vertigo." Bit over the top, sorry. From Leon Saunders in Newton. She's the Italian branch of the family. Leone says, "makes Henry Lawson look like a cheap peddler of bad Christmas bonbon jokes." Assuming there's such a thing as a good Christmas bonbon joke, I gather. And this one from Len Sandy in Glebe. "Buy this book. Do you really want to contribute to the death by starvation of a potential Nobel laureate because you were too lousy to fork out $30 for an unrecognised masterpiece?" And from a not-so-famous playwright living in Noosa, Queensland, Duffy Bilson, he's Welsh, okay, comes this: "If The Gaze of Dogs were a play, I would have written it myself." He's Welsh but spent most of his life in Calcutta. I'm a writer. I don't do accents. Now, you may have noticed on the cover of the book is a quote from a blurb by my dear friend Peter Carey. "I devoured it," he says. Folks, to be honest, don't try this at home. The stuff they put in printing inks these days, you could wind up in the emergency ward with a very strange story to tell. All the foregoing might indicate to you that I set out to write this book with a tongue-in-cheek attitude. That is not the case. I had no attitude. I started from point A, mining my experiences on the Anarchy Gemfields, pun intended. With no idea where point B was going to be, I ploughed on for the next 10 years. I had encouragement from many people, chief among them Bob Sessions from Penguin, my London agent Pat Kavanagh, my Australian agent Sally Bird, lots of nibbles and lots of publishers, no bites, until there was almost nowhere left to go, and then into the life of The Gaze of Dogs stepped Lynn Gain and Valentine Press. I believe Lynn, her admirable publicist partner, April Pressler, you already met, and Valentine are emblematic of a new wave of publishing that will change the way we decide what we want to read and how we want to read it. The traditional publishers have fallen on hard times. Weighted down with the constraints of business models built over decades, they're crumbling under the onslaught of new technology that has no respect for tradition or for an empathetic relationship between publisher and author. I'm pleased to say those days have not gone, they've just moved across the road. Between the old, hard copy sympathetic and new online insensitive schools of publishing, a third wave has sprung up. I call it guerrilla publishing. This is the publishing arm that takes control of the available conduits and turns them to the advantage of author and reader. Not subservient to the dictates of Random House or Amazon or Kindle, rather it exploits those platforms and provides unprecedented access to a storehouse of literary exploitables. It combines the practical benefits of technology with the old traditions. I'm proud and excited to be a part of this revolution. I have to make special mention of a few select people who have helped me in the writing of this book. From the very beginning, Bob Sessions, I already mentioned, then acquisitions editor of Penguin, offered encouragement and helpful advice. I still have his rejection letter for the first draft of, as it was then, Backwater. I'm taking the unusual step, it says, of passing on the reader's comments. Bob, you've had no way of knowing until now how encouraging those words were. I felt special. I was being rejected, but not out of hand. Those words made me feel I'd been selected for special treatment. It kept me going. It's a publisher's duty, I believe, to keep writers going, to their mutual benefit. And I thank you now, 20 years later, for doing that for me. The second person I have to mention is Chris McCourt, an old colleague of mine from TV writing days. Chris couldn't be with us tonight. She's in Ecuador, headed for the Galapagos Islands. Some people will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid a book launch. Chris was always good at story structure, where I wasn't. This is well written, she said after her first reading of Gaze, but the story sucks. She denies to this day that she used those words, but she did, and I'll be forever in her debt for saying them. This guy, the central character Ned Sheridan, is too passive, she said. He has to have a mission. She helped me work out what that mission was, no spoilers, and enabled me to turn the book from a rambling anecdote into the compelling masterpiece it is today, complete with singing dialogue and soaring, vertigo-inducing prose. The third person I want to especially thank is also absent, though he lives in New York, so I'll forgive him for not being here. Peter Carey's instruction, after reading the earlier drafts, to keep it in the moment, was a mantra that I repeated to myself over and over as I struggled to come within a distant cooey of his brilliant writing. I'll forgive him too for eating my book, because he said such wonderful things about it in the blurb he wrote for it. The next person I must thank had no direct involvement in the writing of the book, but the example he has set over the years for excellence in his craft is an inspiration to any writer struggling to bring his work to a vaguely acceptable level. Duffy de Bilson's cousin, the slightly better known Australian-born David Williamson, generously agreed to help me launch this, my first novel, and I will forever be grateful to him for doing so. No doubt he struggled too with his early plays, Stork, The Removalist, Don's Party. Then he went on and struggled through another 50 or so. The result of his most recent struggle, The Big Time, is a terrific play about a struggling writer, as it happens. Too late now for my generous plug to be of any value here in Sydney, David. But if any of you get the opportunity to see it in another city, I urge you to do so. It really is. It's a great play. Those of you who have had a chance to open the book might have noticed it is dedicated to Penny TFB at last. This needs some explanation. In the early days of writing The Gaze of Dogs, my wonderful, patient wife, Penny, would ask from time to time, "How's the book coming along?" After a year or two had elapsed, this had become a little more tersely, "So what's happening with the bloody book?" As we moved into the 21st century, it evolved into, "Are you ever going to finish that fucking book?" It became much easier to refer to it as TFB. So here it is, Penny, TFB at last. And thank you for being so patient, tolerant and supportive. I could not have done it without you. Thank you to everyone here tonight who has supported and encouraged me along the way. My fabulous son and daughter-in-law, James and Amy, my beautiful daughter, Katie, to all my extended families, sisters, cousins, in-laws and outlaws, who never said, "Why hasn't the book been published yet?" It was always, "When's the book coming out?" Like it was a foregone conclusion. Well, you were right. And I hope you'll enjoy reading TFB as much as I did writing it. But I hope it doesn't take you 20 years to get to the end.